This is so nice, thank you. Not picking on this commenter at all. This is a super sweet comment. It just gave me a really good opportunity to talk about the next thing I wanted to talk about. They say a new way to watch the ones that they haven't seen since they were a kid. And the first thing that brought to mind for me is Batman Forever. So, for the uninitiated, Batman Forever is this one. So it's got Jim Carrey, Tommy Lee Jones, Nicole Kidman, and this is not Michael Keaton, this is the Val Kilmer Batman. You've probably seen it as a kid. It's super campy, it's extremely fun. It's kind of a fusion of like Tim Burton darkness / campiness, and kind of like, in my opinion, like a little bit of a precursor to Long Halloween darkness. I actually just disappeared to check on that. Apparently those two pieces of media are contemporary, like the Long Halloween comic and this movie. They happened at basically the same time, but this comic is based much earlier in Batman lore. It's the second year of Batman's existence. Anyway, back to this movie. Super fun for lots of reasons. Anyway, this movie's wonderful. It's also a great way to get back into Batman if you haven't looked at it in a while, because there's so many more interesting themes than you like. Like if you like film more than you used to, if you're more interested in psychology than you used to be. Really interesting stuff. And the psychology stuff is not out there because Nicole Kidman plays Dr. Chase Meridian, who is a very psychoanalysis, like Freudian, Jungian psychiatrist, psychologist, who is a love interest of Bruce Wayne. So it's right there. Anyway, these two are the highlight of the movie for me. And apparently they didn't really get along in the process of making the movie. It doesn't really matter. They're consummate professionals, so the performance is great. But Jim Carrey plays Edward Nygma, so Enigma, and he is a former Wayne Enterprises employee who Bruce Wayne personally fires for being a nut job, and that process turns him into a supervillain known as the Riddler. And Tommy Lee Jones obviously plays Harvey Dent, now known as Two-Face, kind of post Long Halloween. Yeah, right here. Post Long Halloween, the year after Long Halloween, I suppose, kind of in the lore of things, but this is after he gets his face all messed up and becomes a more complicated character, although I would argue he's been complicated the whole time. This movie, of all the movies, after I read Long Halloween, was when I realized there was some really interesting, like, filmmaking stuff going on here. They lean hard into the whole id, ego, superego thing, and you'll notice that as soon as you watch it. Like, if you have any doubts, psychiatrist, that's how you know you're supposed to be thinking about that kind of thing, especially in the 90s. Another favorite example I have of it, actually, is the kind of soon-to-be new wife in Twister when the main male character is chasing his soon-to-be ex-wife around, trying to get her to sign the divorce papers, and his soon-to-be new psychiatrist or psychologist wife is, like, taking calls with clients asking about what they think of their mothers in the backseat while they're chasing storms around. 90s had a lot to say about therapy. Anyway, Batman creates the Riddler. Not blaming him for the Riddler being nuts initially, but literally, Bruce Wayne, who is Batman, fires Edward Nygma, who becomes the Riddler. The Riddler teams up with Harvey Dent / Two-Face, and they become kind of a villain duo over the course of this movie. So you've got Batman, you've got Robin, you've got these two. And these three are kind of forming that id-ego, superego triangle I was telling you about. Check it out. And Robin adds a really complicating factor to the whole thing, because this has been mentioned before, like, on the internet, but the filming of this movie is, like, I saw somebody say that, like, it's so, like, artistically done and well-structured that it almost rhymes. But, like, you see, there's lots of reflection on Bruce Wayne's actual grief at losing his parents, and also Robin's grief at losing his whole family. And there's a super well-aligned, very poetic scene at the end where one of these guys saves the other in a very poetic way. But there's just a lot of initial commentary about what Batman's role in this whole ecosystem is, you know? Because we always present it as, like, it's a dark and stormy and terrible environment, and he's, like, the hero that rises above it all. But it's, like, very clear, particularly in this movie, that he has a hand in creating these monsters, whether he intends to or not. And there's also something about the protege who's also grieving his own tragedy that kind of throws that into sharp relief, plus the love interest who's, like, extremely psychiatrically interested in what Bruce Wayne has going on. So, to review, you've got id, kind of primal desires, attention-seeking, recognition-seeking. You've got superego, so rules, morality, seeking, righting the wrongs of the world through extreme justice, vigilante justice. And then, of course, you have the titular character, Batman, who is struggling between the kind of chaos that comes from the trauma of his extremely dark past and the lack of structure of his qualifying traumatic event of losing both of his parents to a violent crime in front of him, And there's the superego element of him that wants to align himself with the law, you know, like wants to align himself with Gordon. He gets in way too deep with Harvey Dent, in my opinion, and part of, because of that bias of his, like he'd like to be on the right side of things, at least the way that his kind of candidly stuck at 12 years old justice brain works. And then watching him try to pass those lessons along to recovering circus freak Robin over here is, it almost gives like a Mr. Fantastic vibe, if I can be honest, which is a great movie, like, but another very complex one, depending on your like personal views of child rearing and how politics should play into that. And again, this is all totally on the face because we have a psychologist on staff very interested in this guy and asking him a bunch of questions. So anyway, this is for the girls, as I've said before. If you're interested in this, go check it out and tell me what you think. Especially if you've already seen it and can tell me what you think now.